I'm Jerry Layton, CEO of CyberStrong. I'm here with Rob Nolan. Going to turn it over to you, Rob, to give a brief intro.
Hi, yeah, Rob Nolan. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer with Expeditors. We're a third-party logistics company based out of Seattle, about 45 years old. Um, we're in multiple countries, just about anywhere and everywhere that the United States is legally allowed to, ship and move goods. We have a presence there. So.
Thanks, Rob. First, want to thank you for taking the time to spend with us here at Stronger this year. You have a great story. You've just been at Expeditors about a year and a half now, right? And just wanted to, if you could give us a little background on what since you've joined, what were your priorities and goals, objectives, and where are you right now?
I joined the company last August, so just over a year now. And my first, anytime you join a company, you're always, I'm the first CISO, by the way, here. So always the first goal is to understand where you are in terms of technology, process, and understanding of risk. So that was our first foray, was to understand specifically how we view risk as a company, how we talk about risk as a company, and then relate that to cyber, right? So thinking about it more specifically on the business side, and then translating that into what we need to execute in order to meet those same viewpoints, but just through a different technical lens. So that was that was my first investment, actually, was building out this program and understanding and making sure that we were aligned from a business perspective on how we think about and handle risk. So once we made that investment, we started creating the pathway in which we can capture this information and do so in a way that's meaningful and it's accurate, right? It isn't based on so much interviews or those types of things where it's more anecdotal, but concrete, and using technical controls to understand our risk posture, and then deciding where do we want to go with respect to managing the aggregate of risk in a more meaningful way. So in 2022, Expeditors was hit with a pretty significant attack. It's all public knowledge. You can look it up, but so I won't say anything that's not already readily available. But the event put us in a very low risk posture. All right, so basically zero risk tolerance. And that has a significant rate limiting impact on what we can do from a technical perspective, advancing our program with respect to how we serve our customers today. And we desperately needed to get out of that. And the best way for us to do that is really through three things, right? Increased visibility and understanding of compliance. And, when things go sideways, how do we respond? So it really wasn't until and unless we've improved those three things could we, realistically raise our risk posture, risk tolerance, right? So going from zero to something is beneficial for the rest of the business, because then they can start to see an avenue to new features, an avenue towards competing in new markets, and that's really what we're trying to focus on.
Being the first CISO and clearly having the goal of quantifying risk, being able to understand that is always a challenge. But I think the bigger challenge probably for you was, how do you put that into a business conversation? Because they probably hadn't had those conversations prior to you without having a CISO in place.
Yeah, I would say, I always look at, when I first met with the board, actually before I met with the board, I met with, I report into the CIO, in our discussion around, what was the conversations like before I got here? It was always a good starting point. And I think the message is by and large the same, but the delivery and the understanding of why that message matters is what I was after and what we needed to change. Um, you know, Prior to me showing up, I think our metrics were largely performative. What are the systems telling us? How many events are we seeing and tracking? And those things are important, but not really relevant with respect to like material impact, and showing kind of a return on security investment. So, we needed to make sure that those metrics in our messaging wasn't purely performative, but was informative as well. So, what are the systems telling us? But more importantly, what are we doing as a result of those events? And what changes in our program are needed in order to address what the systems themselves are saying? And the systems include like everything from SIM to threat intelligence to your vulnerability management platform. All of those things kind of create a holistic view of where your vulnerabilities and potential risks lie. And it's important to be tracking those, but it's more important that the board understands the why behind those things and what we're doing to manage the outcome. So those conversations were, I think, first enlightening for the board, because this was presented in a different view that they may have not have seen from us specifically in the past. Our board members are, they're members of other boards as well. So I won't speak for their other companies, but through that process, we really tried to hone in on risk management as being the driver for the program for multiple reasons. One, it helps us understand how we're going to handle things internally. But the other is so that we, can meet these not just regulatory requirements as a publicly traded company, but understanding specifically what our customers are requiring us now from a cyber perspective as well. So, we move goods for a lot of customers all over the world. And so in that sense, we're kind of like hidden in plain sight. People don't really know who we are unless you're in the logistics space. But in like, for example, one of the requirements that we would have is for the German automotive industry, they have a certification that they're requiring of their third-party logistic providers, right? So it's called Trusted Information Security Assessment Exchange, or TSAX. It's just based on ISO, but the goal there is to say, hey, if all things are equal, and you're a German automotive industry player, if all things are equal, can cyber be a differentiator? And I think if one has a certification and the other doesn't, the answer is yes. So, having that type of frame of mind is beneficial because it helps us tie directly what we're doing to value, but it also allows us to not really, when you're in this industry, in the cyber industry, it's pretty daunting, right? It's like we're winning these small battles, but it never feels like we're ever going to win the war. um, and we spent a lot of time talking about like these ephemeral, malicious bad actors who are super well funded, and they're never going anywhere. They're persistent, and the problem's only exacerbating. So that's always there, right? But the positive flip to that is, if we implement these controls, if we do these things, in a consistent way and can show the efficacy of the program time and again, then we'll be able to reach, certain levels of certification, whatever that may be, right? So for the German automotive industry, it's CSAX. Okay, now we're competing for or remaining, relevant in that industry. So now we're competing for business, or CMMC for the defense industrial base. Right now we're competing for bigger market share. So that's kind of the viewpoint that we're trying to emphasize, because that's far more positive, and it's a concrete plan, right? And that's more the pathway for us.
How have you approached risk quantification and scenario planning. I know that was a part of your strategy, and it's kind of a two-part question. And what impact has that had on the conversations with the C-suite and the board that you have regularly?
Yeah, I think when we look at it, you know, so obviously we're a customer of CyberStrong, and we enjoy that partnership. And pulling in actuals from our systems into that platform helps us understand, where we are from a controls perspective, and then can understand and quantify what it looks like from a financial impact perspective if we do not do these things and if those risks are realized. And then I always take the smaller side of that because, the impact, we're, you never let a crisis go to waste. We have actuals, you know, 2022 gave us actuals, and we have, these aren't market-based numbers. These aren't, pulled from the advise and insurance, you know, metric. These are pulled from our 10K, right?
Yeah.
So we know very specifically what those numbers look like, and when things go sideways, and that's, by and large made the messaging a lot easier. It's made it more concrete. We know very painfully how much is at stake when we, are unable to do our jobs effectively, right? Or are, in this case, victims of a crime. I think people often forget that, right? These breaches happen not because of some lacks of security control, but really we're victims of crimes, right? And
Right.
there's often a quick way to kind of just brush that over and not think about that and point to, well, what type of security controls did this team have? And it's like, well, you know again, these are well-funded folks. I'm not saying every breach is nation state and super school stuff, but a good portion of them are. But having that discussion, to go back to the second point, which is how is that then changing our investment strategy? We can look at that risk, understand the impact if things are ever realized in that sense, and then make the determination and prioritization around the work that's required to either manage that risk or accept it or figure a way to transfer it. In the mitigate space, it really opens up more conversations around, do we want to patch these things, or do we want to iterate off of them? And that's been a much better discussion because they both take resources, and in most cases it's the same resource. So for us to have a conversation around, well, let's move toward building the future and managing this risk for now until we can collapse that system and bring the new one forward is a conversation I don't think we've been having prior to us bringing the data.
Rob, have you seen the conversation changing? I've talked to some of your peers and they said, previously it was a line item on a presentation. Now it's, board members reaching out, asking to be educated, having more one-on-one conversations, building more relationships with different, whether board members or other C levels that you might not have had in the past, because everybody wants to understand, when you're reporting up, they want to really understand what the major risks are and how they can help.
I think the conversations are uh, folks, especially at the board level, and just really everybody. The board matters because they're setting our direction, or helping set our direction, and helping inform our leadership on where we should be heading as a company. Um, they understand that these systems are, well, really everything is so interconnected now that the dependencies are far-reaching, right? I mean, I've never thought I'd have a discussion about software bill of materials with the board before, but those are the
Yeah.
kinds of conversations we're having now, because people are fundamentally understanding the interconnectedness of just about everything, from whether it's a software library to a firewall. We all understand how things kind of connect in one way or another. So the conversations are getting more in depth, which is really, really, empowering, I think, for cyber folks who have to make those conversations meaningful. They're getting more technical, which is good. But they're all really tying back to one thing that matters, and that's, what's the material impact here? And at the end of the day, we're all, every business is in the business of making a profit. Well,
Yeah.
most businesses are, right?
Yeah.
Um, and, defending and protecting the company is first and foremost, right? And that may mean protecting client data. That may mean, ensuring the safety of certain instrumentation and systems and fields, et cetera. All those things kind of matter. So the conversation is starting first, really in the end is like, do we understand the elements that make up our technical footprint today? Do we understand the risk in an aggregate? And then do we think we'll suffer any material impact as a result of any of those risks being realized? And I think that's been a really simple way to kind of have those conversations.
Yeah, and it's so important, right? Being able to have the feel of more people in the boat, right? That everybody's rowing in the same direction, as opposed to, you coming and having to explain or give bad news. If everybody understands where the risks are, then they understand, where they need to spend to alleviate some of those risks. But we talked about implementing a cyber risk management platform. That was a major part of your strategy. I think the cool part is it really helps drive business growth. Can you give us a couple of examples on that and how you're seeing success with that?
Yeah, I think, the customers who've stayed with us through the event or have since come back to us um, have done so largely with the expectation that we have, improved our understanding of risk and have dramatically improved our cyber posture. And that's been impactful to have those discussions with them to not only allay any fears they have about where we are today, but more importantly, describe where we're heading. And you cannot do that if we don't fundamentally understand our program. And through visibility, through compliance, and then validating our response procedures. So those three things have been the driver that really all stem from risk management. Really all stem from that framework because we can holistically see now, what our footprint looks like and the impact of some of the decisions we've decided to make or defer. And those conversations now are driving, are really, I'm sure if anybody on the call who's receives these vendor forms where they're like 100 400 questionnaire on what's your security posture like, those are nice and interesting, but they're really really brutal to fill out all the time. Um, and I think that it starts there. That's the initial conversation, but cybersecurity now, our team is involved in the bid process. We're involved in, RFPs. We're involved in renewals. And if we're not, consistent, and if we're not presenting our footprint in a clear way with risk clearly defined, those conversations become very, very difficult. So it's super important for us to stay kind of risk focused when we go into those conversations and ensure that we're presenting our posture in the right way. And it's been, we've won business as a result of the improvements we've made. We've maintained great relationships as a result of the improvements we've made. And we're leading in a lot of these conversations, whereas before we were a checkbox in the past. So it's been transformative. And like I mentioned earlier, as we think about like what does the future hold, the goal is to understand what those regulations and requirements are, not just from our perspective, but from the client's point of view, and ensure we're hitting those things so that we can start to either maintain a footprint there or gain market share in different industries or verticals. So
Yeah.
that's what we're after.
Yeah, I mean, the key, right? You win business and you keep customers. If you can show that, that's a huge value to the business, right?
Yeah, it
Uh,
really is.
so for some of the security leaders that are trying to, elevate their cyber risk management program to a strategic level, any advice you can give them, how they should target some early wins, maybe some projects they should prioritize? What would what wisdom would you give this group, after going through this over the past year?
Yeah, I would say, I am certainly fortunate in that, my leadership fully understands the impact of cyber, right? Because we felt it. So I'm not suggesting everybody go get breached, but it really helps when there's a clear understanding of material impact in the event that one of these things get realized. In terms of how I'd approach it prior to here is I'd make sure that I understood like specifically what do we do? How do we make money? How do we operate? And where can cyber cause a material impact and start to draw that back to real dollars? Prior to joining Expeditors, a while back, I was with a mid-sized exploration production company. And the metric there is pretty simple. You can look at the Brent, or you can look at WTI, or for the cost of a barrel of oil, right? So
Yeah.
if your job is to, or if your company pulls hydrocarbons out of the ground, ships them around and sells them, then the metrics are readily available because it's a commodity. Now, in the impact or understanding impact is then drawing out in the field and spending time with those folks to understand specifically how they do their work, find those vulnerabilities that exist, and start to draw risk value to them. And the interesting thing that one of the discussions I had back then was like walking. I spent a couple of weeks in one of our basins in South Texas and just kind of walking around with folks every day, attended their safety meetings, really got into the weeds with them, very specifically on how they operate. And then afterwards, sat down and talked about risk and cost and and the need for improved security. And the foreman was like, "Well, Rob, we already got security. Everyone's got guns, and there's snakes everywhere." I'm
Yeah.
like, "That's not the same." But I guess
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's just like really understanding how you can support and enable the business, and then using their terminology to drive that discussion in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and do you think that also takes, the view of cyber out of a cost center and, showing business value? Do you think that that kind of helps with that discussion as well that you have with
Yeah,
C-level?
I think so. You can look at it as a cost center. You can look at it as insurance, or you can look at it as a driver for improvement in both technology as well as efficiency. And I say that because if security is embedded in every process, we're a third party logistics company, but we're not vessel owned, so everything we do is software based, right?
Yeah.
So by and large, we're a software development company. That means that if we can embed security throughout the pipeline, for example, in the CI/CD type of thing, or as DevSecOps type stuff, then we're faster to market on improved technology because we've embedded security from design to deployment, and that makes that reduces cycle time, it reduces the backlog. So there's significant efficiencies that can be gained when security is embedded and thought of as a go first, or uh, method or mentality.
Yeah, and I think when, as you talked about, helping win business and helping keep customers happy, that changes from being a cost center to a business enabler, right? That's what you're doing. And, it's easy to understand the value and get funded when you're helping win deals and helping customers renew and be happy.
Yeah, yeah. But no rose-colored glasses. It's still a it's difficult for folks to do all
Yeah.
those security things, and sometimes it's a real pain to get folks to see the value behind these things, or just like, because some of it feels like the challenge is you never want security to feel like it's security theater. We're just doing these things for the sake of it. Um, so drawing the value back, and through that risk lens, I think really helps folks see the value there.
Yeah, it's for us, Rob, it's been a great partnership as well. We've seen you evolve really quickly, and we've seen you move from a technology perspective, going to automation this year, which we're super excited about. And just again, thank you for being here. I don't know if we have a few minutes if you want to take some questions, if anybody has any,
Sure.
or see what's out there. I've seen any questions pop up.
Yeah, and thanks for the partnership. It's been a good run so far. We're excited for what's coming.
Right. Any no questions, Rob, but any parting final advice you'd like to give?
I would say, definitely, if you haven't looked at this program, I would suggest highly to look into it. I like the integration between this and my vulnerability management platform, through a data lake. So some technical aspects of being able to draw this together really makes this a more robust program for us that we can use actuals versus the theoretical or time snapshot. Nothing other than good luck with everything, and always available. So
Oh, I wasn't looking for the plug, but I'll take it, Rob. I appreciate
yeah,
it.
no worries.
Always take a plug, right? So
Yeah,
thank you very much again. I know your time is super valuable, and really enjoyed spending the last half hour with you.
usual. Thanks, Jerry.
See
Bye,
you, Rob.
folks. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.